Can one pair of shoes change someone's whole life? Then listen carefully to the story of the red shoes. Once there was a kind but poor girl named Karen. During the summer she walked barefoot, and in winter she wore old wooden shoes. One day an elderly shoemaker made her a beautiful pair of red shoes from pieces of red cloth. Karen loved them at once and could hardly stop looking at them. From that day on, she thought about them all the time. After Karen lost her mother, a wealthy elderly lady took her into her home. She gave Karen warm clothes, a comfortable place to live, and everything she needed. Still, Karen could not forget the red shoes. One day she saw a bright red pair in a shop. Although the lady wanted her to choose simple shoes, Karen secretly chose the red ones instead. Little by little, she became more interested in looking beautiful than being humble. One Sunday, Karen wore her red shoes to church. While everyone listened quietly, she kept thinking about her beautiful shoes. As soon as she stepped outside, something magical happened. The red shoes began dancing by themselves. Karen tried to stop, but her feet would not obey her. She danced through the streets, across bridges, and deep into the forest without being able to rest for even a moment. Karen danced for many days without stopping. She became tired and wished she could simply stand still again. At last, she understood her mistake. She realized that pride and the desire to impress others had taken control of her heart. She truly regretted her actions and promised to become kind and humble again. Slowly, the magic of the red shoes faded away, and Karen was finally free. From then on, Karen cared more about kindness than fancy clothes or beautiful things. She gladly helped other people and appreciated everything she had. Her heart became peaceful once again. The lesson of this story is, true beauty does not come from what we wear but from the goodness inside us. A kind, honest, and humble heart will always shine brighter than anything money can buy. Have you ever judged someone just by their appearance? In a distant kingdom lived a kind-hearted prince. One day, he heard about a beautiful princess and decided to ask for her hand in marriage. To show his sincere feelings, he sent her a magical rose from his own garden and a nightingale with the sweetest voice anyone had ever heard. The prince hoped these precious gifts would touch the princess's heart. When the princess received the gifts, she was amazed at first. The rose filled the palace with its lovely fragrance, and the nightingale sang the most beautiful songs. But when she learned that both gifts were real and natural, she frowned. "I prefer shiny and artificial toys," she said, sending both the rose and the nightingale back. The prince felt deeply disappointed, yet he refused to give up hope. The prince dressed in old, simple clothes and found work at the palace as a swineherd. During his free time, he created a magical cooking pot. Whenever it boiled, it played a cheerful melody and revealed the delicious meals being prepared throughout the town. The princess was fascinated by the unusual invention and wanted it immediately. She asked the swineherd what he wanted in return. The swineherd asked for a few kisses from the princess in exchange for the magical pot. She was surprised at first, but she wanted the toys so badly that she agreed. Later, the prince made another wonderful toy that played enchanting music. The princess wanted that one as well and accepted his unusual request again. Just then, the king discovered them together and angrily sent them both away from the palace. Once they were outside the palace gates, the swineherd revealed who he truly was. He was the prince who had once sent the rose and the nightingale. "True love is worth far more than beautiful toys," he said before walking away. The princess realized how badly she had judged him, but it was too late. This story teaches us that we should never judge people by their appearance or possessions, but by their kindness, honesty, and the goodness in their hearts. Have you ever wondered if an old tinderbox could completely change someone's life? A brave soldier was walking home after a long journey when he met an old witch in a dark forest. She pointed to a huge hollow tree and asked him to climb down inside. Hidden beneath the tree were rooms filled with treasure. In return, she wanted only an old tinder box. Curious about her strange request, the soldier accepted the task and carefully climbed down into the tree. Deep inside the tree, the soldier discovered 3 large rooms. In the first room, a dog with eyes as big as teacups sat on a chest full of copper coins. In the second room, another dog with eyes as large as millstones guarded a chest filled with silver. In the third room, the biggest dog of all watched over a chest overflowing with gold. Using the witch's apron, the soldier gently moved each dog aside and filled his bag with as much treasure as he could carry. Carrying his treasure, the soldier climbed back to the surface. As he prepared to hand the old tinderbox to the witch, curiosity got the better of him. He asked why the little box was so important. The witch refused to answer and demanded only the tinderbox. The soldier became suspicious, and an argument quickly followed. Realizing that the witch had evil intentions, he defended himself and left the forest to begin a brand new life. When the soldier arrived in the city, he bought fine clothes, helped poor people, and enjoyed a comfortable life. As time passed, however, his gold slowly disappeared. One evening, he noticed the old tinder box in his pocket. The moment he struck it, the dog from the first room appeared before him. The magical dog promised to obey every command. Soon the soldier had gold again, and before long he met the princess. A warm friendship began to grow between them. When the king and queen discovered what had happened, they ordered the soldier to be thrown into prison. Just when all hope seemed lost, he struck the tinderbox one last time. Instantly, the 3 magical dogs appeared and came to his rescue. They ended the injustice and set him free. The people wanted the brave soldier to become their new king. He and the princess lived happily together, and everyone learned that true happiness comes to those who use courage, wisdom, and kindness together. One day, a hardworking girl accidentally dropped her spinning spindle into a deep well while fetching water. Afraid that her strict stepmother would be angry, she sat by the well and cried. Finally, she gathered all her courage and jumped in to retrieve the spindle. Instead of falling into water, she found herself in a beautiful meadow filled with colorful flowers. She had no idea that a magical adventure was about to begin, one that would test her kindness, courage, and willingness to help others. As she continued her journey, she came across an apple tree that called out, "Please shake my branches." "My apples are ripe." Without hesitation, the girl shook the tree until every apple had fallen. A little farther along, she found an oven full of fresh bread. The loaves cried, "Please take us out before we burn." Carefully, she removed each loaf and placed them safely beside the oven. Happy to have helped, she continued her journey with a cheerful smile. At last, the girl arrived at the home of Mother Holly. The kind old woman welcomed her warmly and invited her to stay and help with the household. Every day, the girl worked carefully, kept everything neat and clean, and faithfully shook Mother Hall's large feather bed. Whenever she did, thousands of soft feathers floated into the sky, and snow began to fall across the world below. Mother Holly was delighted by the girl's honesty, diligence, and cheerful spirit. After some time, the girl began to miss her home and asked if she could return. Mother Holly understood and led her to a large gate. As the girl walked through it, a shower of sparkling gold poured down over her from head to toe. When she arrived home, everyone was amazed. Seeing this, the lazy stepsister wanted the same reward. However, she refused to help the apple tree, ignored the bread in the oven, and did her work carelessly while staying with Mother Holly. Soon, the lazy girl also wished to go home. Mother Holly led her to the same gate, but this time no gold appeared. Instead, thick black pitch poured over her and could never be washed away. Meanwhile, the hardworking girl lived happily and reminded everyone that kindness, honesty, and hard work always bring the greatest rewards. The true treasure in life is never gold. It is a good and generous heart. What would you do if tiny elves secretly helped you while you were asleep? Long ago, in a small town, there lived a poor shoemaker. He was honest, hardworking, and loved making beautiful shoes, but fewer and fewer people came to his shop. Soon he had enough leather for only one last pair of shoes. He carefully cut the leather, placed the pieces neatly on his workbench, and went to bed, hoping tomorrow would bring better luck. He had no idea that a wonderful surprise was waiting for him. The next morning, the shoemaker entered his workshop and stopped in amazement. On the table stood a perfectly finished pair of shoes. Every stitch was neat, every detail flawless, as if a master craftsman had made them. That very day, a wealthy customer bought the shoes for a generous price. With the money, the shoemaker bought enough leather for 2 more pairs. Once again, he prepared the pieces before bedtime and wondered what might happen during the night. When morning came, the new shoes were finished as well. Night after night, the same little miracle happened, and the shoemaker's business quickly began to grow. Curious to discover the secret, he and his wife decided to stay awake and hide inside the workshop. At midnight, 2 tiny elves quietly appeared. Smiling as they worked, they skillfully stitched the shoes with incredible speed before disappearing into the darkness once again. The shoemaker and his wife noticed that the little elves wore only thin clothes while working through the cold nights. Wanting to thank them, they lovingly made tiny shirts, jackets, trousers, warm hats, and little shoes. The following evening, instead of leaving leather on the table, they placed the gifts there. When the elves found them, they laughed with delight, quickly put on their new clothes, danced happily around the workshop, and sang cheerful songs together. After that joyful night, the little elves never returned. By then, the shoemaker had earned many loyal customers, and his honest work kept his shop successful for many years. He never forgot the kindness he had received and always helped those who needed a hand. This story reminds us that kindness, gratitude, and generosity often return to us in the most wonderful ways. Have you ever heard of a princess who lost her true identity and had to win it back with courage? Long ago, in a distant kingdom, there lived a kind and brave princess. One day, she set off on a long journey to marry a prince from another kingdom. Traveling with her were her maid and her loyal talking horse, Falada. But during the journey, something unexpected happened that would change her life forever. As the journey continued, the maid revealed her cruel nature. She threatened the princess and took away her beautiful clothes, precious jewelry, and everything that proved she was the real princess. Then she forced the princess to wear simple clothes instead. When they arrived at the castle, everyone believed the wicked maid was the princess. The real princess stayed silent, hoping that one day the truth would finally be revealed. The true princess was given the task of looking after the geese in the fields near the castle. Every day, she thought about her old life and missed her faithful horse, Falada. Even so, she never gave up hope and continued to treat everyone with kindness. Before long, the people around her noticed that the goose girl behaved with unusual grace and kindness. They began to wonder who she really was. One day, the young king noticed that the goose girl acted with the manners of a true princess. Wanting to learn the truth, he spoke with her kindly. The princess honestly told him everything that had happened during the journey. The king carefully investigated the story and uncovered the maid's deception. At last, the real princess was recognized, and everyone admired her courage, patience, and honesty. The wicked maid faced the consequences of her actions, while the true princess married the prince and lived happily. Peace and justice returned to the kingdom, and the princess never forgot the lessons she had learned. She treated everyone with kindness and respect for the rest of her life. From that day on, everyone remembered that honesty, patience, and kindness always shine through in the end, no matter how difficult the journey may be. What would you do if everyone you loved suddenly disappeared? In a faraway kingdom, 6 princes and their little sister lived happily together. But everything changed when their father, the king, married a mysterious woman. The new queen knew powerful magic and became jealous of the princes. One morning, while the children were walking in the forest, she cast a terrible spell. In an instant, the six brothers were transformed into beautiful white swans and flew away into the sky. The little princess decided to search for her brothers all by herself. She walked for many days through deep forests, crossed rivers, and climbed high mountains. At last, she met an old woman who lived in a small cottage. The woman told her that the swans were actually her brothers and that only patience and courage could break the spell. The princess had to remain silent for 6 years and sew 6 shirts from special star flowers. Even one spoken word could destroy everything she had done. Without hesitation, the princess accepted this difficult challenge. Every day, she collected star flowers, quietly sewed the shirts, and thought about her brothers with hope in her heart. One day, a young king found her in the forest while he was hunting. Although she could not speak, he noticed her kindness and gentle heart. He brought her to his castle, and after some time, they were married. However, because the princess stayed silent, some people began to doubt her and spread cruel lies about her. The years passed, and the princess continued working on the 6 shirts with great patience. She became tired, but she never broke her promise. On the final day, the people who wanted to harm her tried to punish her. At that very moment, 6 swans flew down from the sky. The princess placed the finished shirts over her brothers. Suddenly, the magic disappeared, and the swans became princes again. Only the youngest brother was different because one sleeve was unfinished, leaving him with 1 swan wing. After the spell was broken, the princess could finally speak again and tell everyone the truth. Everyone learned how brave, patient, and loving she had been. Her brothers were saved, the family was reunited, and happiness returned to the kingdom. From that day on, people remembered her incredible courage. This story teaches us that patience, keeping our promises, and fighting for the people we love can help us overcome even the most difficult challenges. Have you ever heard that a baby's destiny can be written on the day they are born? That is exactly what this story is about. In a small village, a kind but poor couple welcomed a baby boy. A wise woman predicted that one day he would marry a princess. When the greedy king heard the prophecy, he became furious. Hoping to change fate, he took the baby far away. But the greatest adventure of the young boy's life was only just beginning. A kind miller found the basket floating down the river and raised the boy with his wife as their own son. As he grew older, he became brave, honest, and always ready to help others. One day he arrived at the royal castle. The king recognized him at once and gave him an impossible task. He ordered the young man to bring back the devil's 3 golden hairs. Everyone believed no one could ever succeed. The young man traveled across forests and mountains. Along the way, people asked him to discover why a spring had dried up, why a tree no longer bore fruit, and why a lonely ferryman could never leave his boat. He promised to help them all. At last he reached the devil's home, where a kind old woman welcomed him. She hid him safely and, while the devil slept, carefully pulled out 3 golden hairs. Each time 1 golden hair was pulled, the devil woke up and asked what had happened. The old woman pretended she had dreamed about the troubles of the people. Without realizing it, the devil revealed the answers to every mystery. By morning, the young man had the 3 golden hairs and the solutions to all the problems. Thanking the old woman, he began his journey home with great confidence. On his way back, the young man shared the answers with everyone he had met. The spring flowed again, the tree was filled with delicious fruit, and the ferryman finally found his freedom. When he returned to the castle, the king was amazed to see the 3 golden hairs. The young man had completed the impossible task. Soon he married the princess, and they lived happily ever after. This tale reminds us that courage, kindness, and keeping our promises always bring wonderful rewards. A king's son loved a beautiful princess. But before the king died, he made his son promise to marry another princess. The young prince had to fulfill his father's wish. The princess was very sad, but she did not give up. She called 11 loyal friends and they all dressed as hunters. Thus, they became 12 hunters and set off toward the prince's kingdom. A difficult and uncertain journey was waiting for them, but the princess was ready to face every challenge with courage. When the 12 hunters arrived at the palace, the king thought they were brave young men and took them into his service. But a special lion lived in the palace. He could discover hidden truths. The lion told the king these are not real hunters. They are 12 young women. The king did not believe him. So the lion suggested a test. Peas would be scattered at the entrance. If they were women, the peas would move under their steps, and their secret would finally be revealed. A kind servant heard about the plan and warned the 12 hunters. The princess told her friends, "Tomorrow, walk firmly and do not touch a single pea." The next morning, the 12 hunters entered the hall. They all walked carefully, and not one pea moved. The king said to the lion, "See, they really are hunters." But the lion did not give up. He planned another test to discover the truth. This time, he would tell no one about his secret plan from anyone in the palace. This time, the lion had 12 spinning wheels brought into the hall. He believed that women could not pass them without looking. The servant learned about the plan and warned the hunters. The princess asked her friends to be careful. The next morning, the 12 hunters passed the spinning wheels without looking at them. The king now thought the lion was mistaken. Days passed, and the 12 hunters remained at the palace. Their secret was still safe from everyone. One day, the king learned that the princess he was supposed to marry would soon arrive at the palace. This news made the real princess so sad that she fell to the ground. When the king tried to help her, her glove came off, and he saw the ring on her finger. He had once given this ring to his beloved princess. Now he understood the truth. His beloved princess was standing before him. He found his love again and thanked the 12 loyal hunters for their great courage and loyalty. A king had a great secret. Every evening after dinner, he ate a special dish that only he knew about. His loyal servant prepared it every day and brought it to the king. But the servant often wondered why the king kept this meal hidden from everyone. One day, he could no longer resist his curiosity. After the king left the room, he carefully lifted the lid. Inside, he saw a small white snake. Although he was frightened, he tasted a tiny piece of it. At that moment, something incredible happened. The servant could suddenly understand what the animals were saying. The next day, he left the palace and continued on his way. After a while, he saw 3 fish lying on the shore and struggling desperately. The servant quickly put them back into the water. The fish thanked him and swam away. A little later, he saw ants carrying food to their nest. To make sure his horse would not step on them, he changed his path. Then he saw a raven feeding its young. The servant arrived in another kingdom and found work at the royal palace. Some time later, the king's daughter held a great celebration. But the next morning, her precious ring was missing. When the ring could not be found, the king began to suspect everyone. The servant knew that he was innocent. Suddenly, he heard the ducks in the palace garden talking. One of the ducks said that it had found the ring in the lake. The servant immediately went to the lake and found the ring exactly where the duck had described. The king wanted to test the servant's wisdom and kind heart, so he gave him 3 tasks. First, he ordered him to collect thousands of seeds scattered throughout the garden. While the servant was wondering what to do, the ants came to help him. Together, they collected all the seeds in a short time. For the second task, he had to find a precious pearl at the bottom of the sea. The fish he had saved earlier helped him and brought the pearl to him. The final task was the most difficult. He had to choose the correct golden apple for the king's daughter. The servant successfully completed all 3 tasks. The king admired his honesty, courage, and kind heart. The king's daughter was also deeply impressed by his kindness. In the end, they married and lived happily together. The servant never forgot the animals he had helped along the way. At the time, he did not know that every good deed would one day return to him. Now he understood something important. True kindness means doing good without expecting anything in return. The lesson, helping others, being patient, and doing good can bring unexpected kindness and happiness back into our lives. A hungry fox was searching for food in the forest when he came to a green vineyard. High above him, he saw beautiful bunches of grapes. They looked big and juicy. That is exactly what I have been looking for, he thought. The fox walked closer to the grapes and made his first jump. But they were much higher than he had expected. He stepped back, ran forward, and jumped with all his strength. His paws almost touched them, but he still missed. The fox did not want to give up. This time, he ran farther and jumped even higher. He stretched his paws as far as he could, but the grapes were still out of reach. He landed on the ground and looked up at them thoughtfully. There must be a way, the fox thought. He looked at the vine and tried to climb up the stem. He managed to climb a little, but the thin branches could not hold him. He lost his balance and fell back to the ground. The fox tried again from another spot. He jumped several times and then stopped for a short rest. No matter how hard he tried, the grapes remained far above him. He was getting tired, but his hunger made him try once more. After a while, the fox was breathing heavily. His legs were tired and his back was aching. Still, he made one final jump with all his strength. When he missed the grapes again, he sat down and quietly looked up at them. The fox looked at the grapes one last time. They are probably sour anyway, he said. He was trying to make himself feel better. Maybe they really were sour. But deep down, he knew he simply could not reach them. At last, the fox stood up and walked away from the vineyard. He had not gotten the grapes, but he could surely find something else to eat in the forest. After a few steps, he looked back. Maybe another time, he thought. The fox had not decided that the grapes were bad because they tasted sour. He simply could not reach them. Sometimes it is easier to call something bad when we cannot have it than to honestly accept that we failed. As the fox continued on his way, he learned something important. When we cannot reach something, we should not simply call it worthless. Admitting that we failed can help us learn, try again, and find a better way. A dog was walking home with a large piece of meat in his mouth. As he crossed a bridge, he saw another dog below in the water. But he did not know that what he saw was actually his own reflection. The dog in the water also had a large piece of meat in his mouth. The dog's eyes grew wide. His piece is bigger than mine, he thought. Without dropping his own meat, he decided to take that piece too. The dog stopped in the middle of the bridge and carefully watched the dog in the water. His reflection was watching him too. The dog did not notice anything strange. He could think of nothing but that large piece of meat. If I get his meat too, I will have a huge meal. The dog thought. He held his own meat tightly. Then he quickly leaned toward the water, trying to grab the piece he thought belonged to the other dog. At that moment, the meat in his mouth fell into the water. The dog stared down in surprise. A few seconds later, the other dog disappeared too. That was when he realized he had made a terrible mistake. The dog finally understood that the other dog had been his own reflection. The other piece of meat had also been only the reflection of his own meat. If he had not wanted more, he would still have his meal. Sadly, the dog sat on the bridge. He was hungry, and nothing was left for him. The meat he had owned only moments before was now gone in the river. His greed had taken away what he already had. After thinking for a while, the dog stood up and continued on his way. From that day on, he learned to appreciate what he had. Whenever he saw someone with something bigger, he did not immediately want it for himself. When the dog finally reached home, he was very hungry, but he had learned an important lesson. He understood that even small things should be appreciated. Wanting more can sometimes make us lose what we already have. The lesson of this story is simple. Greed can make us lose the good things we already have. Instead of always looking at what others possess, we should appreciate our own blessings. Being grateful can make us happier and more content. One morning, a crow sat on a tree branch with a large piece of cheese in her beak. Below, a fox spotted her. The moment he saw the cheese, he came up with a clever plan. He only needed to make the crow open her beak. The fox stood beneath the tree and looked up at the crow with admiration. "What a beautiful bird you are," he said. The crow proudly lifted her head. The fox immediately realized that his flattering words were working. "I am sure your voice is just as beautiful as you are," the fox continued. "Why don't you sing a song for me?" The crow felt proud and wanted to show the fox how wonderfully she could sing. The crow opened her beak and began to sing loudly. But that was exactly what the fox had been waiting for. The cheese fell from the tree and landed right in front of him. The fox quickly grabbed it. The fox sat down and smiled. "Thank you for the cheese," he said. You should be careful when someone gives you too many compliments. Not every kind word is spoken with an honest heart. The crow felt embarrassed and sad. She had believed that the fox truly admired her beauty and voice. Now she understood that he had only praised her because he wanted to get the cheese. The crow thought carefully about what had happened. She realized that some people can sound kind even when they only want something from you. From that day on, she decided to listen carefully and never trust every compliment. The next day, the crow returned to the same tree. When the fox appeared again, she watched him carefully. He started praising her once more. But this time, the crow kept her beak firmly closed and refused to be fooled. The fox waited and waited, but the crow said nothing. Finally, he realized that his trick would no longer work. The crow flew to a higher branch, proud that she had learned from her mistake. The crow had learned an important lesson. Do not believe every beautiful word you hear. Some people praise you not because they admire you, but because they want something from you. Being wise means looking beyond the words. One day, the north wind and the sun began arguing about which of them was stronger. Just then, they saw a man walking along the road. The wind challenged the sun and claimed that he could make the man take off his coat. They waited with curiosity. The north wind went first. He blew fiercely through the clouds, made the trees sway, and used all his strength to try to tear the man's coat away. But the man wrapped his coat even tighter around himself to protect against the cold wind and continued walking. The wind became even angrier and blew as hard as he could. The man's hat nearly flew away, and the branches of the trees were tossed from side to side. Yet the man held his coat even tighter and continued walking with his head lowered. At last, the north wind was exhausted. No matter how strongly he blew, he could not make the man take off his coat. The wind gave up and said, "I couldn't do it." Now it was the sun's turn. Everyone was curious to see what the sun would do. The sun slowly appeared from behind the clouds. At first, it shone gently and sent its warm rays toward the man. After feeling the warmth that followed the cold wind, the man relaxed and loosened his coat a little. He suddenly began to feel much more comfortable. The sun rose higher and warmed the air even more. As the man continued walking, the temperature increased. Small drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. Finally, he could no longer bear the heat, so he took off his coat and carried it over his arm. The north wind watched everything in amazement. The sun had neither shouted nor used force to prove its strength. It had simply used warmth and patience, making the man take off his coat willingly. The wind began to think about what had happened. The wind went to the sun and admitted his defeat. "You are stronger than I am," he said. The sun smiled. It knew that true strength does not always come from being harsh, but from choosing the right way. For the wind, this was an important lesson. From that day on, the north wind understood that he could not solve every problem with force, no matter how strongly he blew. The sun had shown that calmness, patience, and kindness could sometimes be the strongest methods. They had both learned something important. Lesson: force and anger do not always help us get what we want. Calm, patient, and kind actions can often achieve much better results. True strength does not mean forcing others to obey, but convincing them willingly through patience and understanding. One morning, a farmer noticed that his crops had been damaged. During the night, some birds had entered his field and trampled the young plants. The farmer set up a large net to catch them. But among the trapped birds, he saw someone he did not expect. The next morning, the farmer came to his field and found many birds under the net. Cranes, crows, and other birds were trying to escape, but they could not get free. Suddenly, the farmer noticed a stork among them. The stork pleaded with the farmer in fear. "Please let me go. I am not like the other birds. I did not come to damage your field. I was only with them." The farmer listened carefully and thought about what the stork had said. The stork continued, "I am a mother who brings food to her young. I did nothing wrong. You should separate me from the others." The farmer thought for a while. He wanted to know whether the stork had really damaged his crops. Finally, the farmer shook his head and said, "I would like to believe you, but I found you among them. You were with them in my field." The stork became sad and realized that the actions of his companions had also caused trouble for him. "I should never have come with them," thought the stork. Until that day, he had never paid attention to whom he spent time with. He believed that having good intentions was enough. Now he understood that choosing the right companions was important too. As the farmer gathered the birds from the net, the stork looked at him one last time. "From now on, I will be more careful about whom I spend time with," he said. The farmer heard his words, but he knew that the consequences of poor choices are not always easy to escape. That day, the stork learned an important lesson. It is not always enough to be good yourself. The people or animals you spend time with can matter too. Sometimes, the choices of others can affect your own life, even when you did nothing wrong. The stork promised the farmer that he would never again join birds that harmed the fields. From then on, he decided to choose his friends more carefully. Having a good heart is important, but standing beside the right friends is important too. The stork never forgot that day. Sometimes, being with the wrong friends can get you into trouble, even when you have done nothing wrong. Lesson: choose your friends and companions carefully, because their choices can affect you too. On the highest place in the city stood a magnificent statue of a prince covered in gold. Everyone called him the Happy Prince, but one night, a little swallow discovered his sad secret. When he was alive, the prince had never seen sadness behind the walls of his palace. Now he could see all the suffering in the city. Poor children, hungry families, and lonely people filled his heart with sorrow. One evening, a little swallow stopped beneath the prince's feet while flying to Egypt. The prince asked for a favor. "Take the ruby from my sword and bring it to that poor woman." The swallow agreed and carried the ruby to the woman. Then the prince asked again, "Take the sapphire from one of my eyes and bring it to her sick child." The little swallow admired his kindness. The next night, the prince saw a hungry family in another part of the city. "There is another sapphire in my other eye," he said. The swallow carried that stone away too. Now the prince could see the world more clearly. Finally, the prince asked the swallow to give all the gold covering his statue to the poor. The little bird carried the golden leaves away one by one. Hope began to appear on the faces of the poor. Winter had already arrived. The little swallow was trembling with cold. "You must fly to Egypt," said the prince. but the swallow refused to leave him. "You taught me kindness. I will stay with you." With her last strength, the swallow stayed beside the prince. One morning, she quietly fell to the ground. At that moment, the prince's leaden heart broke with sorrow. The people still did not understand his true worth. The city officials thought the statue looked ugly and decided to remove it. The gold was taken away, and the broken leaden heart was left behind. But the kindness of the prince and the swallow was far more precious. The city's greatest treasures were two things that no one noticed: the prince's broken heart and the little swallow's sacrifice. For true happiness is not found in what we possess, but in the kindness we give to others. A giant lived alone for many years in his beautiful garden, which he refused to share with anyone. One day, he came home and saw children playing there. He angrily chased them away. At that moment, the garden fell into endless winter. The giant built a high wall around the garden and put up a sign forbidding children from entering. But when the children's laughter disappeared, the birds became silent, the flowers faded, and the garden fell into a cold silence. The giant did not care. Spring arrived, and the whole village became colorful. Trees blossomed and birds sang happily, but snow still covered the giant's garden. He looked out of his window and wondered why spring had not come to him. A deep sadness filled his heart. One morning, the giant saw a little child who had entered the garden through a small gap beneath the wall. The child could not reach a tree and was crying. For the first time, the giant felt pain in his heart and realized how selfish he had been. The giant went to the child and lifted him into the tree. At once, the tree covered itself with beautiful blossoms, and the birds began singing again. The snow melted in other parts of the garden too. The giant finally understood that the children belonged there. The giant had the wall torn down and invited the children to play in his garden every day. When they came, the garden came alive again. The giant felt a great happiness he had not known for many years. His garden was no longer lonely. Many years passed. The giant grew old, but the children's happiness always made him feel young. Yet he never saw the little child again. He never forgot him and sat beneath the tree every day, hoping that the child would return. One winter morning, the giant saw the little child again in the far corner of the garden. There were wounds on the child's hands and feet. The giant became sad and said that no one should ever hurt him, but the child smiled peacefully. The child smiled and said that the giant had finally learned what love meant. Then he told the giant that he would take him to a special place where peace could be found. The giant understood that sharing and loving were the greatest gifts in life. From that day on, the garden became the children's favorite place. The giant had learned to share his love instead of hiding it behind walls. He discovered that true happiness is never lost when we share it with others, it only grows. Hans had a beautiful garden that he loved dearly. Everyone knew him as a kind and helpful man. His best friend was the rich miller. But the miller constantly asked Hans for favors, and Hans could never bring himself to refuse his friend. One day, the miller saw the beautiful flowers in Hans's garden. "A true friend shares his flowers with me," he said. Hans felt sad, but he still gave him a bunch of flowers. Instead of thanking him, however, the miller wanted even more. When winter came, there was nothing left in Hans's garden. The miller's storeroom, however, was full of food. Hans was hungry, but his friend did not help him. One day, he even came and asked, "Could you give me some flour?" Hans granted this request too. Then the miller gave him an old wheelbarrow. "I am giving this to you," he said. Hans was very happy. But the miller immediately added, "You can repair it and then help me with my work." When spring arrived, Hans began working in his garden again. But the miller called him every day for a new task. Hans left his own work behind and helped his friend. The miller claimed that this was what true friendship was all about. One day, the miller asked Hans to carry some heavy sacks. Hans was tired, but he agreed once again. By evening, he could not even return to his own garden. The miller did not care about his exhaustion and immediately gave him another task. That night, heavy rain began to fall. Hans had to go outside to finish the miller's work. As he pushed the wheelbarrow, he could hardly see the road. Still, he continued because he believed his friend was waiting for him. Suddenly, Hans slipped and fell to the ground in the darkness. The wheelbarrow rolled away too. Hans tried to stand up, but he was completely exhausted. The storm showed no sign of stopping. That night, something terrible happened to the little gardener. When the miller heard what had happened the next day, he pretended to be sad. But what he really thought about was his wheelbarrow. He should have taken better care of it, he said. It became clear that Hans was not a friend to him, but only a helper. Hans's story taught everyone an important lesson. True friendship is not about constantly taking, but also about giving. A true friend does not use you. A true friend cares about you, supports you, and stays by your side when times are hard. In a beautiful palace garden lived a rocket who believed she was the most important creature in the world. She was so proud that she looked down on all the other fireworks and thought she was truly extraordinary. A grand wedding was being prepared at the palace. The prince and princess were going to be married, and fireworks would light up the night sky. The rocket was certain that she would be the star of the celebration. While the other fireworks excitedly talked together, the rocket told them how ordinary and unimportant they were. As she spoke about her own greatness, she even began to cry and considered her tears another special talent. When night arrived, the fireworks rose into the sky one after another. The rocket waited patiently for her grand moment, but she had become damp. The servants tried to light her, yet she simply refused to explode. At last, the rocket was thrown away and carried outside the palace. Even while lying in the grass, she believed she was something wonderful. She was certain that everyone was waiting to see her magnificent performance. One day, two boys found the rocket. They thought she was an ordinary stick and decided to throw her into the fire. The rocket still believed she would soon give a magnificent performance and impress everyone. When the flames reached her, the rocket suddenly shot into the sky. But nobody was there to admire her. With a loud bang, she exploded and scattered colorful sparks. She thought her performance had been absolutely magnificent. After the explosion, the rocket fell back to the ground. Nobody applauded, and nobody watched her with admiration. Even so, she was convinced that her performance had made a deep impression on everyone. The next day, the rocket declared herself a great success, yet nobody even knew her name. Her pride and exaggerated opinion of herself prevented her from seeing the truth about who she really was. The rocket story teaches us an important lesson. Constantly praising ourselves does not make us valuable. True worth does not come from seeking admiration, but from doing things that genuinely matter. Deep in a mysterious forest, there once stood a magnificent castle. A frightening beast lived there, but no one knew the great secret hidden in his heart. One day, this secret would change Beauty's life forever. Beauty was the youngest of 3 sisters. Her father was a merchant who loved his family dearly. One day, he had to leave on a long journey and asked his daughters what they wanted. Beauty wished for only one thing, a rose. On his way home, the merchant was caught in a terrible storm and became lost in the forest. At night, he found a magnificent castle and took shelter there. In the morning, he picked a beautiful rose. Suddenly, the frightening beast appeared. Angrily, the beast roared, "You have stolen my rose." "You must pay for this," the trembling merchant told him about his daughter. The beast gave him a choice. Either he could stay at the castle, or one of his daughters could come in his place. When the merchant returned home and told his family what had happened, Beauty stepped forward without hesitation. "This happened because of me. I will go in your place," she said. Despite her father's protests, Beauty bravely went to the castle. The beast did not hurt her. Instead, he told her that she could go anywhere in the castle and use anything she wished. Every evening, he invited her to dinner. Slowly, Beauty discovered that a kind heart lived behind his frightening appearance. As the days passed, Beauty and the Beast became friends. They talked together and walked through the garden. Every evening, the Beast asked the same question, "Will you marry me?" But Beauty still did not know what her heart truly wanted. One day, Beauty told the Beast how much she missed her father. The Beast allowed her to visit her family. When Beauty learned that her father was ill, she stayed with him for a long time. When she returned, she found the Beast weak in the garden. Beauty ran to him and said that she did not want to lose him. At that moment, she realized her true feelings. Tears filled her eyes. "I love you," she said. Suddenly, the castle filled with brilliant light, and the spell was broken. The Beast was actually a prince who had been transformed by an evil spell. Beauty's love had freed him. From that day on, they lived happily together. Beauty learned that true beauty is not found in appearance, but in a loving heart.